Hey everyone, welcome to the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. I am Anthony Cosenza, and for the first time, the first time for the 2017 season, we get to talk about a Bengals victory. It's not the first technical victory for the Bengals in 2017 because they did win back in January of last season, but that's all in the past. The Bengals have got their first win. It's been hard. It's been a hard road for the Bengals to get that first win against the Browns. They've had a rough couple of first weeks, but they're in the win column, and they face a big game this week against the Buffalo Bills. I'll be joined shortly by my co-host, Scott Schulte, who is planning to join us, and he spoke to our special guest this week. If you tune into CincyJungle.com, Jeff Hunter, who is with Buffalo Rumblings. He's the editor over there. It's the SB Nation Buffalo Bills site. Jeff, thanks for joining us. Appreciate the time. How are you, sir?
I'm doing awesome. How are you?
Well, your team's 3-1. You got to be doing pretty well, man. I mean, I think most Bengals fans would kill to be in that boat at this point. But appreciate you coming on. Appreciate you, tuning in and joining us here. Just let our viewers know, if you could, a little bit about yourself, how long you've been with Buffalo Rumblings, what you do over there, and maybe a little bit of your background as a Buffalo Bills fan.
Yeah, so I've been writing with Buffalo Rumblings for about 2.5 years now. I started back as a contributor right after the end of the 2015 season. Been steadily building up. I'm now one of the editors under our editor-in-chief, Matt Warren. I do a little bit of everything. I like to research numbers, like to look back into history. I'm originally from Buffalo. I don't live there anymore, but I lived there for the first couple decades of my life. It's Bills fandom is a birthright at this point, so you just kind of have to go with it. And here I am, 17 years after our last playoff game.
Yep, and you know what? If there's one fan base that understands the plight of the Buffalo Bills fan base, it is the Cincinnati Bengals fan base. Unfortunately, we've only been to half as many Super Bowls as the Bills have, but we have just half the amount of losses that the Bills have in the Super Bowl. Not to bring up old wounds, my friend, but anyway, thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Let's just dive right in. The Bills are 3-1. They've got a new coach. To me, it's a little surprising. We talked about it before we fired it up here. I don't want to say it appeared to kind of be a fire sale by the Bills this offseason, but they trade Ronald Darby, former Pro Bowl corner. Stephon Gilmore wasn't re-signed. Just kind of they didn't seem to do a whole bunch to mightily improve their team, yet they're 3-1. They've got a couple of good wins under their belt already this season. What's going on? What's going right with this team? And how big of an effect is that new coach having in Buffalo?
Yeah, it's the tank talk was pretty heavy early on. But, I mean, it was always kind of tempered, especially with the trade of Darby and then Sammy Watkins right at the same time, because they got some draft picks, but they also got some good players back in Jordan Matthews and EJ Gaines. Not quite at the level of player that they sent out, but if you're trying to tank, you're not going to take back Jordan Matthews and EJ Gaines. So I was always a little tempered on that, but what we've seen over the preseason and training camp in the first 4 games so far is that Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane, who worked with him in Carolina, they're really building the kind of team they want to build. It's they're getting rid of guys who just, for whatever reason, don't fit their system, and they're just bringing in guys who can do what they want them to do. Guys like Gaines, guys like Tre'Davious White, who was a 27th pick of the draft, the safeties Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. They turned over the entire secondary, and it's been one of the best secondaries in the NFL so far this season. Offensively, they're still struggling. There's brought in Rick Dennison as the offensive coordinator. They switched up blocking schemes a little bit, and as a result, LaShawn McCoy hasn't been able to do what LaShawn McCoy does as far as running the ball. He's still pretty good when he gets the ball in open air as far as a passing game. And then also you have, without Watkins, really lacking a deep threat. They brought in Kalen Clay as a speedy guy from Carolina, but he's like a fifth receiver. I think he has one catch this year. So the offense is still struggling, but Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier, the ex-Vikings coach, they're really doing what they want to do with that defense, and it's paying off big time so far.
Yeah, the defense, I've been writing up a couple of different pieces for Cincy Jungle, and, and looking at it, their defensive rankings in a lot of different categories. They're top 10, top 5. So, it's safe to say, I guess, the defense to this point is carrying this team to a 3-1 start. McDermott, to me, is got to be an early candidate for Coach of the Year, given the fact that there's no Watkins, there's no Gilmore, there's no Darby. And no Gillislee, who has been putting up some statistics in New England. So good job by him there so far. How has Tyrod Taylor looked, though? His contract situation's been a little odd over the past couple of years. It seems as if Buffalo's committed to him. He was kind of injured, but has played all of the games, if I remember correctly. So is he kind of just managing things at this point, or is he, actually making some big plays, making some clutch time throws?
I don't think in all my years of following football I have ever seen somebody who is so widely judged across the spectrum as Tyrod Taylor. There are people who think that he needs to be benched the next time he throws a pick, and there are people who think he's playing at an all-pro level. It's just all over the place with him. Personally, I've always kind of tempered my expectations with him because he's so hard to judge, because he's not a traditional quarterback in any sense. He doesn't really do much of anything from the pocket. He's not a guy who's going to read the whole field, step up and gun it. But there's no quarterback in the league who can get out of pass rushes the way he can. And when a defender gets his hands on him, any other quarterback is going down. Tyrod, there's like a 75% chance he's going to spin out of it and run for 3 yards. So he can make some big plays. This year without Watkins, he's had a little bit of trouble with the downfield throws. Charles Clay's had a few big catches, but other than that downfield touch that we saw in his first year hasn't really been there. But, with his legs, and he's definitely progressed as far as like using the middle of the field and just doing those short and intermediate throws. He's gotten a lot better with that. He's not going to blow anybody away with counting stats, but if you look at his per pass numbers or things like that, he's usually doing pretty well. And then with his legs, that kind of puts him in I've come to accept that he might be like the least bad quarterback, or at least one of them. He's not going to win any games, but he's like a really flashy game manager.
Yep.
The game manager who can make a few plays.
Yep, I can see that. And he's a guy that for opposing defenses really tends to make those frustrating plays, those plays where you think you have him and he'll move the chains, whether it's with his legs or with throw. I want to welcome in my co-host Scott Schultze. And Jeff, you and he have already connected digitally through the Behind Enemy Line series that we do on CincyJungle.com. Scott, how are you, sir?
Well, if you can hear me, I'm doing well.
I can hear you, buddy, and I think Jeff can too. So
yes, sir.
Good to have you in. I know you've got some questions for Jeff as well.
Yeah, you guys kind of hit on the first one a little bit with the passing game. And before I get to the question I was going to ask, since we were talking about Tyrod Taylor, I will just kind of ask briefly, looking at guys like E.J. Manuel, Trent Edwards, J.P. Losman, etc., how would Tyrod Taylor rate compared to some of the passers you've had? Not as far as just pure passing, but I guess as far as we like this guy as a quarterback. You kind of mentioned he's not obviously Peyton Manning, but do fans generally like, yeah, this is the best guy we've had since, a Bledsoe or someone, or I guess what is their feel?
Yeah, that's actually a pretty common refrain. He's the best quarterback since Bledsoe. But then at the other hand, like the names you listed, it's like you got to understand that he's not competing against a whole lot. But I mean, he's made Pro Bowls, albeit as an alternate, but he's been in the Pro Bowl. He's a guy that's not going to make a ton of mistakes. He's not going to turn the ball over. Like the Bills said this year, he threw an interception that was tipped at the end of the very first drive of the first game, and they haven't turned the ball over since. So he's like I said, as far as a game manager thing, he does not turn the ball over. They don't move the ball well as you'd like to see, but best quarterback since Bledsoe is a very fair thing to say.
And one question, and this is one that I know I had asked you somewhat in the Behind Enemy Lines series, so I guess I'll frame it a little differently. For those who are hearing the podcast but haven't read the article, which I guess hasn't been posted yet, looking at the Bills as far as an offensive standpoint in the passing game, which I guess still goes back to Tyrod Taylor, they traded up for Sammy Watkins after a couple injury-prone years. They traded him to the Rams before the season started. They just lost Jordan Matthews to an injury, so he will be out against the Bengals. And then Zay Jones seems to be struggling, converting targets into receptions. So I guess for a Bengals fan or even for a Bills fan watching the game, what should fans be expecting as far as a Bills passing game, a vertical game or any game involving throwing the ball forward?
Yeah, it's like I touched on and when I talked to you earlier, Jordan Matthews is not a huge he's a good player, but he's the third leading receiver on the team behind LaShawn McCoy and Charles Clay. And like I say, he's a good player, but he's not vital to the offense. Like Zay Jones is having major struggles over the last couple games ever since he dropped that potential game-winning touchdown in Carolina. Outside of him, they're really thin on the depth chart overall. They did just sign back Philly Brown, who had been with them in the offseason. So, I mean, there's really not a huge vertical threat. They got Kalen Clay from Carolina, but like I say, he's fast, but he's really not much of anything else. The vertical passing so far this year has been Clay, and the backup tight end, Nick O'Leary, he had a couple big catches over the course of the year. So the passing game is not really involving the wide receivers as much as we'd like it at all right now, but the tight ends and LaShawn McCoy, whenever he gets the ball, he's a threat, especially out in open space. So, yeah, the Matthews injury, it hurts, but it doesn't really change my expectations one way or another.
I know Anthony had started on the defensive side of the ball when you joined us. So, as a kind of a draft fan, I will ask, last year in the draft, I know there was a lot of hype regarding a linebacker from Alabama, Reggie Ragland, who seemed to fall to them, who there were a lot of expectations. I know injuries have kind of hit him. Have you guys even had a chance to really see him much in training camp or preseason, or does he seem legit? Does he seem like someone who's going to be healthy and play?
Yeah, Ragland was actually traded in the offseason. He's in Kansas City now.
Okay, never.
Oh. So yeah, he was a Rex guy in a 3-4 defense as a middle linebacker. He didn't really fit the 4-3 McDermott scheme. He was kind of floating as like a third linebacker, so they shipped him to Kansas City for a 4th-round pick.
Is that the same with Cardell Jones? Was he also a Rex guy? Were they just trying to clean house?
Pretty much. And then they came in, they drafted Nate Peterman in the 5th round. They brought in T.J. Yates, who ended up getting cut, and now they have Joe Webb as a third quarterback / special teams ace. So, yeah, Cardell, he has a big arm. He doesn't have a whole lot else, and they got a 7th for him from the Chargers. So,
Talking with Jeff Hunter, the editor over at Buffalo Rumblings, the SB Nation Buffalo Bills site. Going to talk to him here for a few more minutes. We've got a couple of questions in our live YouTube chat. I'm going to get to those in just a second. But I want it just kind of before we kind of transition a little bit into specifically the Bills against the Bengals and things of that nature. I want to ask, we talked about this 3-1 start. We talked about the defense potentially kind of carrying the Bills at this point, even though they have, a couple of nice wins under their belt. I don't mean to ask this as an offensive question here, Jeff, but are we looking at a little bit of a house of cards, especially with some of these departures that we've seen? Or is this, McDermott's building a winning culture. He's got, quote unquote, his guys there, and this is the start of something pretty special.
McDermott has a phrase that has kind of become the mantra of the team. It's trust the process. And that's kind of where we are right now. I mean, I definitely get that house of cards kind of feel with it a little bit, especially with the offense struggling so much. But like he's brought in his guys, he's running his defense with Leslie Frazier, and they're doing a very good job of it right now. And if the only reason to be skeptical is that a bunch of guys haven't been successful over the last year or two, right now they're doing fine. And I don't see any reason that they won't be able to hold that up as long as they stay healthy.
Yep. I mean, barely lost. And unfortunately, you told me you were at that Carolina game. I feel bad about that one. But barely lost that one. Their only loss of the season. They beat the defending NFC champions this last week. So, impressive start to the season for them. A couple of questions from some of our live listeners. And for those of you who are new to the program, you can tune in live every week via YouTube or at cincyjungle.com and leave your questions, comments in the threads there. We monitor those. A couple of them that transition into this game against the Bengals here, Jeff, and one simple one was from Sam Turner the second. Hey, Jeff, how are those limited guys looking for Sunday's game? We talked about a couple of those guys, but some of those guys who were limited this week so far and the injury report. I know, for those of you who don't know, we record Wednesday night, so it's a little earlier in the week, and some of those practices Thursday, Friday mean a bit more. But your thoughts on some of those people that have been limited so far this week?
Okay, so I'm looking at the injury report right now. There's a few guys on there. Lorenzo Alexander and Kyle Williams have been having a rest day on Wednesday all year, so they'll be fine. Charles Clay had a death in the family, I believe, so he was excused today. As far as specifically the limited guys, Marcel Darius has not really been a big factor in the defense this year. He's only playing about a quarter of the snaps. Part of that is his injuries. Like the ankle injury. I was at the Carolina game and I saw him working. He went off on the first drive and spent most of the game working on the sideline trying to get back in. Cordy Glenn has missed the last 2 games with that foot ankle injury that's been bothering him since last year. Deion Dawkins, the second-round pick, has been starting in his place. Cordy Glenn is if he comes back, he hasn't been practicing, so seeing him limited is a good sign. They could really use him back in the lineup. And then Shaq Lawson missed last week with a groin injury suffered during the week in practice. They got a really good guy named Eddie Yarborough behind him who just kind of came out of nowhere in the preseason. He's really better as a situational pass rusher, but he can do some things. He looked pretty good against the Falcons. Then E.J. Gaines is also limited. He left the game with a groin injury. He actually injured his groin, then in the middle of a play, actually limped over, ran down Tevin Coleman, and forced a fumble on that play. We didn't get the ball, but he leaves it all on the field. He's a good guy. He's left every game with an injury, but he's only missed a few plays over the course of the year. Whether he'll miss this game, it would be a pretty big loss. I think Sharice Wright would start in his place. He's having a pretty good year, so whether he plays, I don't know, but he's a guy that if he's missing, it'll be noticeable.
Sharice Wright, old USC Trojan. I know him well from being out this way. Before we kind of get you out of here with your predictions, and I've kind of got two questions that tie into each other here. And again, for those of you who are just tuning in, we're talking to Jeff Hunter, the editor over at Buffalo Rumblings, the SB Nation Buffalo Bills site. It's from one of the questions is mine, and one of the questions is from someone in our YouTube chat named Crossout. As the Bills go into Cincinnati this week, what would be your biggest pros and cons facing off against Cincinnati this year, Jeff?
So the pros, I mean, it seems like the matchup, it's kind of strength against weakness on both sides. It's like we both have really strong offenses, but I know Cincinnati's offense has come on since seemingly has come on since they switched offensive coordinators. I know our defensive line has been having a pretty good year, injuries aside. So I like their chances getting to Andy Dalton over the 4 quarters on Sunday. The weakness is when the Bills' defense has been cut up a little bit, it's usually by the backup running backs. Jamal Charles had a really good game for Denver. Tevin Coleman had a very good game for Atlanta. So I know the three-headed monster in Cincinnati, or however the rotation looks these days, guys like Gio Bernard really scare me. He's a guy that just shows one really fast. And this is a thing I touched on with Scott a little bit, that the Bills' defense is quick, but they're not fast in the traditional sense of foot speed. So if you get a really fast guy, like if John Ross can play, he's a guy that can really do damage against a Bills defense.
Good stuff. So kind of to build on that, my question would then be, what are a couple of keys for Buffalo that you think, I mean, you mentioned a couple there, maybe bottling up some of the big plays from Giovanni Bernard, who has had a couple this year, maybe trying to do things to eliminate some of the Bengals team speed that they have. But what are a couple of other keys that you think would really go a long way in the Bills getting a win potentially against the Bengals this week?
Zay Jones immediately comes to mind. He's going to be the nominal number 1 wide receiver. If he can get over his drop issues, Tyrod Taylor still has faith in him. He only has 4 catches this year, but he's been targeted 17 times. So Tyrod is still trying to get him involved in the offense. And if it can click, if he can finally start making those catches and doing something after the play, that's going to be huge. Defensively, like I said, just if they can they've really had their best successes when they can get to the quarterback quickly and force them into mistakes. That they did quite a bit against Trevor Siemian and when Denver came to Buffalo. If they can get to Andy Dalton, if they can force him to make bad throws, the secondary can take advantage of them.
Yep, and if you don't know, the Bengals offensive line has been a bit of an issue this year, and they've done a lot of different things to try and mask certain deficiencies. And I mean, even though he's been hit and sacked recently, Dalton has played better the past couple of weeks, but the first couple of weeks were borderline disastrous from both the offensive line and the quarterback position. Let's get you out of here, Jeff, with a score prediction. We've got someone in the live YouTube chat, John McIntosh, who's on your side, or at least the Bills side. Bills 13, Bengals 3. And if that's the score, regardless of who wins, that would not be a fun game to watch to me. But your score prediction this week for the Bills as they come in and battle the Bengals, a pretty important game for both teams, both for the Bills to continue their momentum. And you said they're going into the bye week. The Bengals are heading into their bye week as well, and they have a string of somewhat winnable game. So a big game for both teams.
Yeah. Honestly, if either team scores more than 17 points, I'll be pretty surprised. I mean, this is a game that really could go either way. It's just going to depend a lot on if either team can break through the opposing defense. It wouldn't shock me at all to see another 9-3 snoozer like we saw in Carolina from the Bills. But that's a very important game from the Bills' end, especially I'm trying to see what's going on tomorrow with Patriots Buccaneers.
Oh yeah. Yep.
If the Buccaneers can win and knock the Patriots down to 2-3, the division becomes winnable. And it's been a long time since they've even been in that conversation. So I like to think the Bills will win this one, but honestly, over the last 17 years, this is coming off of a big win. It's the kind of game the Bills have been losing a lot in their history. I'm going to trust the process. I'm going to give Sean McDermott the benefit of the doubt here. I'm calling maybe 13-7, 13-10 Bills win.
Okay.
And that's one more thing I wanted to touch on, that 13 score reminds me. Probably the Bills' MVP this season has been Steven Hauschka, the kicker. He is having.
What's that like? We don't know what that's like to have a MVP kicker.
There's nobody on either side that's really been standing out. And then Hauschka won his second offensive AFC special teams player of the week. He hit from 55 and 56 last week. He hit from 53 and 55 the week before. He's a guy. If the Bills can get to the 40, they're in range for him. So that's one of the things that's been helping, is that the offense isn't moving the ball, but they got a guy who can make 55-yard field goals at the drop of a hat. So he's a guy to watch out for.
So 13-7 is the prediction. Since you snuck in one little extra, I'm going to let my co-host sneak in one extra question. He's got one more for you. Then we'll get you out of here, Jeff. I appreciate it. Again, Jeff Hunter with SB Nation's Buffalo Rumblings, editor over there for the Buffalo Bills site.
And Jeff, just pretty much based on the 3-1 start, the excitement you kind of mentioned, I guess the tempered excitement with the past. So I guess my question is kind of involved the coaching. Looking at some of the guys that they have brought in, and some of them who maybe had a little bit of success early on, or maybe there was some excitement for, hey, we got, Mike Mularkey or Dick Duron or Perry Flell or Chan Gailey, Doug Marone, Rex Ryan, Anthony Lynn, and now Sean McDermott. So I guess that's one thing very different. The Bengals just have stuck with one coach, win or lose, which has been a lot of frustration for us at times, because we haven't won a playoff game in 17 years with him as the head coach. So we'd like to see a little turnover. Maybe not that much, somewhere in between, one coach and it does. But I guess based on the initial returns, what you've seen, I guess, in training camp and preseason and the first 3 weeks, and the fact they are winning, is the sense that, this is the answer. This is the guy that we've been searching for. We found our coach, or is there still a little? Are people ready to say that yet, or is it a little too soon?
I think. We've been burned so many times. I'm there. I am 100% behind Sean McDermott. He's not flashy. Yeah, I know a lot of the Buffalo media says he gives a lot of really boring answers to questions, but he's got that right. He's got a process, and he's following it, and he's been able to, working with Brandon Beane, bring in his guys, do what he wants to do on both sides of the ball. Obviously the offense isn't really working out just yet, but he's got that roadmap. He's following it, and so far they're 3-1. And you'd see there were a lot of questions when Sammy Watkins and Ronald Darby were traded. Are they tanking? But he brings his team ready to compete, and I'm behind him. A lot of people are behind him. I don't know if everybody's there yet, but I'd say it's probably more than any coach we've had during the drought. At 4 games in, probably more people behind him than just about anybody else I can think of.
There you have it, and the proof so far is kind of in the pudding, as they say, because of a 3-1 start, and you beat an impressive Broncos team, you beat an impressive Falcons team, and a couple of nice wins under the belt. It's not just Browns, Jets. The Jets are in there, but there's some quality wins in there. So, Jeff, thank you so much. Before you bail out of here, I know you've got an early morning, and hopefully we didn't keep you up too late, and go get some sleep. But where can people find your work aside from Buffalo Rumblings? Where can they follow you on Twitter, all that good stuff?
Okay, I'm on Twitter. I'm at Mr. Jeff Hunter. Really, at this point, I'm just writing for Buffalo Rumblings, so go ahead and find me there.
Appreciate it. I appreciate the time, man. I know, like I said, you've got an early morning. Sorry we kept you so long, but you killed it, man. It was fun to talk to you, and appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, no problem. I'll just get another espresso shot in my coffee.
I'll buy it. I'll send you a Starbucks card or something.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Good talking to you.
Thank
All
you,
right,
Jeff.
you as well. That's Jeff Hunter with Buffalo Rumblings, the SB Nation Buffalo Bills site. For those of you who don't know, many of us who work for SB Nation, write, podcast, all this stuff, also have full-time 9-to-5ers, and in Jeff's case, he's got a 4:30 a.m. start, and he's on the East Coast, as you heard. He still stayed with us until almost 9:15 Eastern. So our thanks to Jeff, and go give him a follow on Twitter, at least for this week if you're on Twitter. Obviously bringing a lot of insight, a lot of good stuff, and we are happy to have him. Scott Schultze and I are going to be talking about our take on the Bills game in just a little bit. But Scott, we got to talk about a win. We got a win. There's a win.
Yeah. Well, and I was surprised. I told you it might work last week. I wore the Browns jersey.
Okay.
In the podcast.
Yep.
And shake it up. We won the game.
So
I don't have a Bills jersey.
Who you got on this week?
I went with Ohio State. We don't have a Bills jersey, but they did have Cardell Jones briefly.
Okay.
They used a first-round pick on Dante Whitner, first-round pick on Nate Clements over the last decade since the year 2000. So they've had some Buckeyes. They tend to draft more than the Bengals do. So my thought was, it's the closest. As apparently the key is not wearing Bengals stuff on the podcast.
Well, you're totally going flip mode on it. I love it.
Now, if they lose, then obviously that's just a bunch of nonsense. But until then, that 4:30 is pretty impressive. That makes my 7 a.m. sound very like days ago.
Yeah, I kind of feel bad, but he was great. He was generous with his time, and it was awesome having him. So, Scott, the Bengals pulled off a win against the Browns, and really, there's a few things to talk about. And they're kind of the major storylines, I suppose. But I guess where I want to start is, you look at it and you think, okay, the Browns, not a great team, obviously, this year. Two teams that heading into last week were 0-3. If you watch the Bengals and the Browns play, you saw a lot of struggles from a lot of different areas from the Browns. But even though it's a game the Bengals probably should have won and did, are you encouraged that this was a win that was on the Browns' turf and was such a lopsided win instead of something that was maybe 17-14, 21-17, where it was kind of close and Cleveland nipped at their heels a little bit and then the Bengals pulled away? Essentially, until the second quarter started, the Bengals took control of this game. Now, do you think that is a sign of things to come, or is it the Browns being the Browns?
I'm going to reference this jersey again. When teams like Ohio State or Alabama or one of these elite programs, when they play an equal caliber opponent, that's one thing. When they play Rutgers, Army, UTEP, Prairie View A&M, whatever, you don't get that same feedback as far as how good or bad your team is. I mean, I'm not saying the Browns are Prairie View A&M or anything of that sort, but you watch that game, you could tell they just weren't on the same field. They weren't on the same level. They just didn't seem to have the players, the play calling. They just did not seem to be at a NFL caliber level that the Bengals were. And so I'm very hesitant to say, we just went out and scored 31 points against these guys. The offense is back. The Bengals are back. Heck yeah, let's all go charge out there. We are 100% full speed. We got the ship righted, and here we go. Now, if we had done that to a different team, I might be more inclined to go that route. It's just kind of hard to do that based on who we played, and you look at some of the holes the Browns have on defense, and then you look at some of the kind of questionable play calling or scheming they did on defense too. It just seemed like a very strange. I'm not quite sure what exactly the Browns were doing. Now, if we do that again this week, then I'm ready to say I'm on board, because the Bills currently, granted, they've been the beneficiary of many turnovers, but still they have the #1 scoring defense. So if we can go out this week and put up a 20 or 30, then I'm willing to say, okay, we got this thing righted. But I think a lot of the problems that plagued them in the first 2 weeks when they scored no touchdowns still exist. We still have struggles at center. We still have struggles at left tackle. We have struggles at right tackle. Jake Fisher isn't looking any better. Cedric Ogbuehi's playing time has gone down. They've had to resort to bring in Andre Smith in there. We've had injuries. Trey Hopkins isn't back yet. So the line still has the issues they have on the line. John Ross still has barely sniffed the field. Whenever Joe Mixon gets the ball, it seems like a handful of defenders are there ready to greet him as soon as he gets a handball.
Oh man, that's frustrating to watch.
Yeah, and then you look at he has 2 yards of carry. It's like, but he's doing a lot to get those 2 yards of carry. Someone like me or you, we'd be averaging -2 yards of carry.
Yeah, probably.
And so I'm kind of looking at, okay, since they brought in Bill Lazor, the start of the Packers game, we had something like 2 touchdowns in the first 3 series, and then did absolutely nothing in the final 40 minutes, and then plus overtime. The Browns game, I'm not quite ready to say I'm convinced, because it was the Browns, and some of the things the Browns did were just kind of odd. So I can't say I'm there yet. I just want to see we're playing a good defense this week. I want to see what happens this week before I'm back on board and saying the offense is firing on all cylinders. I'm hoping, if anything, this last week was a preseason. Okay, we kind of got things figured out. We still have the issues in offensive line, but we know how to work around that. We had a good chance to do that last week to figure things out. Let's go do that this week. So I think this week more than anything for me is going to be the big tell. I think last week was, I'm not ready to say, it's all good now because we beat the Browns.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. I'm kind of a little column A, a little column B. I think it was a little bit of the Browns rookie quarterback who kind of struggled. If you notice, Scott, the amount of drop passes by the Browns in that game was absurd. I mean, it was like, now Kaiser missed a couple of throws that were open, but there were guys that bouncing off the hands, bouncing off the chest, and you kind of, for a rookie quarterback, if you want to build his confidence, it just can't happen. And I don't know if you saw that, but I thought I saw a lot of drop passes by the Browns that aided. I mean, look at the Clayton Fedulum interception. That was in Kenny Britt's hands, bounced right off and right into his hands, right?
Yeah, and the frustrating thing with that is they drafted 6 or 7 wide receivers last year. Yeah,
not this year, but last. Yeah.
2016, and the best one, Corey Coleman, can't. He's injured his hand now 2 years in a row, and is going to miss 6 or 8 weeks this year.
Yeah, he's got John Ross syndrome apparently, just in a different part of his body. So Scott, there's one of the things that encouraged me, and you mentioned a couple of those people. You mentioned Andy Dalton and his great performance. He has, the last few games against the Browns, he has been ridiculous in terms of statistics. 4 touchdowns. He did have a lost fumble, which stunk, but no interceptions. Looked very comfortable. I think he only missed 5 passes on the entire day. Ridiculous game. Andre Smith, I thought, stepped in and played pretty admirable at both left tackle position. He hasn't really played in the pros, and on the right side to help out with the issues there. One guy I'm seeing a lot in our YouTube chat, and one guy that we're not talking much about, but had an outstanding game himself, was Nick Vigil. 12 total tackles, a sack, kind of flying around everywhere. And now you've got Kevin Minter cemented in the middle. You've got Vontaze Burfict now on that weak side back in the lineup. You've got Vigil. You can rotate in Vinny Ray. You can rotate in other guys. All of a sudden, a spot that seemed pretty weak last year is looking a little bit more stout this year, thanks to Vigil stepping up.
Yeah, and that was one of the interesting things that Burfict came back, and the big talk, big hype. Here's this guy's in the best shape he's ever been in. He signed that new contract. He's a great player when he's on the field. He's coming back. He's going to be phenomenal. He kind of changes the face of this defense when he's out there. And Nick Vigil's the guy that looks like Burfict. I mean, the things he's doing, like I said, he's kind of running around full speed, getting in the backfield, breaking up, knocking people over, and just, always in the right spot to make the tackle. And yeah, if you can get that from him, and Burfict being Burfict, now you have Vigil being Burfict, that only helps you, because we have a very good front four, but we always kind of struggled with, okay, we have Ray Malaluga and these guys, and Burfict's hurt, so he's not out there. And so, like you said, the linebacker linebacker position has been one we've kind of struggled at. So if he'd, even when Vigil was drafted, some people were like, oh man, who's this guy? Really? We used to pick on third round pick on him. Billings is still out there. Go get, and then of course Billings fell in the fourth round. But I remember in the Cincy Jungle chat room, there was a little angst that, because there were people on, there was a
riot, buddy. There was almost a riot.
Yeah, and partially because we didn't take Billings, and partially because this guy, wasn't even on some, the experts like Mel Kiper and Todd McShay, like their boards. They're like, wait a second, this guy's like ranked 20 or whatever. What about guy number 7, 8, 9, 10? Like, why are you reaching for him? And obviously, sometimes teams, do crazy things, but sometimes there's a reason. And the things in last year, he was adequate, but he looked really good this past week.
Yeah, it's been a good couple of weeks for him. Really, kind of some meh moments, but also, he had the interception in week 1. He's got a sack this week. I just think he's been playing pretty well, and kudos to the live listeners for bringing that up. And yes, Royal Flush 513, did they ever find Lawson's teeth? LOL. Yeah, they did. And I think they used him. In case you didn't know, Scott, Lawson had his front teeth knocked out, and he had to have them kind of replaced by a cosmetic dentist on a hit of Deshaun Kaiser, which was kind of interesting. And hopefully for Christmas, he doesn't have to ask for his 2 front teeth. Terrible joke. Sorry. The other thing, Scott, in terms of backup guys or rotational guys, we talk about the stars. AJ Green had a touchdown, and Andy Dalton had 4 touchdown passes, and it looked great. How about Tyler Kroft doubling his career touchdown total against the Browns with 2, and was the leading receiver in terms of receptions and yards on the day, as well as touchdowns? And, we sit here and we go, well, Tyler Eifert's on the bench. I don't know what Andy Dalton can do. Yet Tyler Kroft, a guy who was maybe talked about as being a 3rd tight end because of CJ Uzoma's emergence last year. I mean, what do you make of this? Is it just, again, he had a good day against a Browns defense that isn't that great? Or is it, what, if you use these guys, maybe the Bengals just have 3 pretty solid tight ends, and not to say that you can immediately replace Eifert, but maybe you can get similar production from some of these backup guys if you really choose to.
Yeah, that's the thing. We were just talking about Nick Vigil, who actually leads the Bengals in tackles this year. It is Tyler Kroft who leads the Bengals in touchdown receptions this year.
Yep.
Tied, but
tied with Green,
still leads them with 2 touchdown receptions, which is pretty good when you figure that he had 0 after the first 3 weeks. Of course, the Bengals had 0 after the first 2 weeks. But But I think, I mean, it's very easy to have forgotten about Croft because when he was drafted 2 years ago, he was another guy like a Nick Vigil that when they took Croft in the third round, some people were like, you know, kind of the same thing. Why did we take this guy? His numbers aren't very good. He wasn't really rated all that high. But everything they said was he's a good receiver, good blocker. And they said last year when Eifert went out, it was Uzoma who kind of stepped in surprisingly and became their main pass target as far as tight ends go. Well, this year, I don't know if it's just him developing more or the scheme and that one play that Dalton hit him on the touchdown, the one where he kind of threaded the needle. I mean, that was a very nice pass and a nice catch. And you watch the replay, and the one thing that the announcers didn't mention is he flips over and lands on his head, and he's still holding the ball. And I know you have the helmet on and everything, but still, you know, someone, you know, first guy's hitting you, the other guy comes and takes your feet out, and you're flipping head over, you know, head first. And you know, that to me, that's an impressive catch. It's not, you know, one of these crazy, you know, AJ Green juggle between three defenders and then run for 50 yards kind of a thing. It's like against Baltimore. But that was a very, you know, it was a nice catch. He held the ball. He's caught 10 and 12 passes this year. He's been very efficient. I'm trying to remember how his blocking's been. I don't think it's been horrible or great, but I would love to see if I think he's supposed to be a better blocker than Uzoma, and if he is, that's obviously a positive because with the offensive line struggling, you need to have those tight ends who, at the very least, can chip, or if not, maybe even have him stay in as an extra blocker, kind of like we did with Jake Fisher his rookie year when we kept him in and we'd run, you know, the jumbo package more than the goal line. We'd run 6 guys, and then occasionally we'd say, hey, we have this guy in here playing a tight end. Let's just throw to him and let him fumble and, you know, cost us a game.
Right.
But that being said, yeah, I mean, it's very encouraging to see the backups coming and do. And that's the thing that you're kind of going in, everyone's saying we have these weapons, let's use them. Well, the one weapon no one mentioned was Tyler Croft. You know, with AJ Green and Bernard, and the 3 running backs that you know, LaFell and Boyd. The one guy and John Ross we just drafted, you know, I'm pretty sure pretty much no one mentioned Croft as one of these, hey, look at all these weapons. But at least after, you know, last week, he looks to be someone who belongs in that conversation.
Well, at a minimum, he's capable, right? I mean, that's really all you can have when you lose a Pro Bowl starter at that position. I mean, I guess that's all you can ask. And I mean, I think leading the team in receptions, yards, and with 2 touchdown catches, that's more than what you can ask from a guy like Croft, who is technically your backup. You know, I've seen some comments already, both on CincyJungle.com as well as in our YouTube chat, about people being upset and sick of Eifert being hurt. I get it. I think we all are. You know, I don't want to delve too much into that, but obviously Tyler Eifert had an offseason back procedure. He has back and knee stuff now that's bothering him, that's keeping him out of games. Might miss this week again. I mean, back – when you tweak your back, I mean, luckily I've never had to have back surgery or whatever, but if you tweak your back, not only does it just basically hinder you from moving in general, but you know, if your back is sore, if your back is tweaked and not even in a major way, your body tries to overcompensate in other ways. Maybe that's what's bugging him with the knee. Maybe that's what's bugging him elsewhere. Unfortunately, just with a back issue, it's just something that tends to linger. And anybody you know that has had, you know, back surgery or anything like that, herniated discs, whatever the case may be, it really limits them. And unfortunately, that's kind of been an issue with Tyler Eifert. I don't want to say it's going to be totally a long-term issue with him, but it's something to monitor, something to be concerned about. Scott, I don't want to end the Browns discussion on a sour note, but it's worth discussing. Vontaze Burfict in his first game back was flagged with a roughing the passer penalty. And if you watched this play, I thought it was borderline, if not ticky-tack at best. He hit Deshaun Kaiser in kind of the hip stomach area, wrapped up, didn't lead with his head. It was maybe a quarter of or a half a step late. Maybe. Is this just something, again, not at the knee, not at the head, not at the neck, nope, no, inside the collar of the jersey, that sort of thing. Is this just something we should continue to expect with Vontaze Burfict, given his reputation, and maybe see some unfair calls that really can potentially hurt the Bengals going forward? Or was this, keep an eye on him, it's his first game back, he's really going to be revved up?
I think it's definitely you earn a reputation one way or the other. If you watch any baseball, you see certain pitchers get calls that other pitchers don't. In the 90s, the Atlanta Braves were infamous whenever they'd show like the top-down view showing home plate, and ideally the ball's supposed to cross somewhere over home plate to be a strike. Whenever Greg Maddux or Tom Glavine was pitching, and you'd look at that top-down view, that ball would be like 3 inches off the outside plate. And without a question, the umpire was calling it a strike as soon as the ball, before it even got there, because he just knew it's close enough. This guy's an ace. That's a strike. And I was watching the Reds had a rookie come up, Luis Castillo. No, it's not a Reds podcast, but he came up. He was hitting the corner. And you watch some of his pitches and just perfect pitches, just barely, get in that corner to get the guy strike out. First 2 games, all you heard about was this guy's control issues because he was walking everyone. Because the umpires were calling all his balls strikes. calling them all balls. And you look at the pitches like, these are perfect. These are exactly where you want them. They're hitting the plate, but far enough out, the pitcher's not going to swing. And he knew, because he was a rookie, he hadn't earned that reputation. But a month in, he had pitched well enough. All of a sudden, those pitches became strikes. And his control magically got better. And I think with Burfict, unfortunately, it's the same kind of thing. He's gotten to a point where he's been, suspended and fined enough times that the expectations for him are different than most other players. And we've talked about this, before with the Steelers, who tend to get away with doing the exact same things and things 10 times worse, and will not get the same punishment that he will get. And it's unfortunate. It seems to be the one encouraging thing was, I don't think there was nothing from the league, no fine or no suspension for the hit. I think it was just an official who was a little flag happy because it was Burfict and it was a good hit. And he's one of these guys who, he plays to the whistle, but okay, then sometimes beyond, but he plays to the whistle. He plays at full speed. He's very aggressive. He drives through his hits, the things you want a linebacker to do. And it was a very, he didn't let up, but the thing where it's a boom, boom play, there's not really much time to let up. And he's someone that he's going to go full bore. And yeah, and even the announcers, and that's, to me, it was, kind of one of the telling signs when even the announcers say that was a bad call. That was a bad flag. Yeah. That was, and as Bengals fans, one thing to say, yeah, that was just garbage. But for the announcers, who are supposed to be partial and generally are saying it's garbage, and for the league not saying anything about it against him, I think it's an unfortunate thing, but I think it's something that is never going to go away until he's done playing football.
Right. And, kind of unfortunate, but it is something that he probably needs to learn. Not make it's a double negative. Continue to make those kind of plays and hit the quarterback, because to me that was a legal hit. However, it is a lesson to be learned that he's going to be very closely monitored. So we'll see about that. The Bengals won 31-7. Great win. Great, they needed to get off the schneid. If you want to say, hey, the Browns was kind of the perfect thing to, okay, fine. It's the Browns. However, I would be far more concerned if it was a team that they should have beat and they barely beat them, as opposed to really stomping them and on the road. There's a lot of positives to be taken from this game, but there are a lot of other games that are coming up down the pike that if the Bengals want to turn around their 2017 season, potentially make a playoff push, they need to start winning those games. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast with Scott Schultze and Anthony Cosenza. You can check out all of our content from this podcast on iTunes, on YouTube, on SoundCloud, and on cincyjungle.com. You can also get in touch with the program via Twitter at BengalsOBI. I am on CJ Anthony CUI on Twitter. Scott, where can they reach you on Twitter?
That is a good. I would have to remember. I think it's Smackabees.
I think you're at Smackabees, right?
Like Smack, Smackabees. It's long story, but yeah, it's not entirely sure on the spelling. I think it's like Maccabees from the Bible with an S in the front and a K. So not exactly like that. Yeah, some version. Yeah, Smackabees is. I'm pretty sure what it is.
And it's Smack the insect, not.
Yes. It's like smack A and B, yes, basically. You can tell I use it a lot.
Smack. Yes, smack an insect, not the other offensive way. But that's where Scott is reachable on Twitter. And like I said, the obinsider@gmail.com, we're reachable there too for all of your questions. And if you are able to join us live every episode, we usually record Wednesday evenings, so please do. We are live in our YouTube chat where we take fan questions. We love hearing the feedback. You can interact with other Bengals fans. Then we also are also live on cincyjungle.com in the comment thread there. We're going to try and get to a couple of questions at the end of this program. We're going to quickly talk about the Bills game because we've spent quite a bit of time at the beginning of the program talking with Jeff Hunter of Buffalo Rumblings, the SB Nation Buffalo Bills site. He's the editor there. But Scott, you had a specific question. You are a rock star, my friend. I'm an afterthought from our YouTube chat from Crossout, who we mentioned earlier. He had a good question for Jeff earlier, but he kind of talking about what to expect with this game, the Bills against the Bengals in Cincinnati. To me, I told you this before, I don't like playing Buffalo. And even though the Bengals have gotten a couple of wins from them recently, I find them frustrating. I find them to be a frustrating opponent. Before you get to that, Scott, specifically Crossout asks, Scott, do you think the Bills will try and stack the box to stop the run and dare Dalton to beat them? Or do you think they will play coverage? Now, before you answer, I do want to note that I did a little bit of research on what the Bills defense has been doing so far this year, and they have been one of the top teams in terms of forcing interceptions. They're one of the top teams in pass yards per game allowed, and they're one of the top passing defenses allowed. So I think that's where Crossout's question comes and really makes a lot of sense. So your thoughts on that?
If I were the Bills, if I was any team, what I would do to stop the Bengals is I would double AJ Green. I definitely, our guest Jeff Hunter mentioned Tre'Davious White's having a great year. I would definitely line up Tre'Davious White on AJ Green. No question. Probably give him safety help. So in that regard, I'd do coverage, but only that. I really wouldn't worry about covering anyone else too much. I would just, I wouldn't blitz because I think a decent front four, the Bills do have a decent front four. I think a decent front four can break through a line that has Cedric Ogbuehi, Jake Fisher, and Russell Bodine. So if I were them, what I would probably be planning on doing is, and I think he said they run a 3-4, not a 4-3. So when I say front four, basically I'm referring just the front. The general front few guys they have up there, let's say the two defensive end, that's nose tackle, and let's say their edge rusher. So, you put your front four guys up there. Don't blitz. Just let you figure they're going to get to Dalton in a few seconds. Dalton's not someone that can handle pressure. You double AJ Green, and then everyone else you kind of keep, up in the box, up near a line of scrimmage, because if you see Jeremy Hill or Giovanni Bernard in the backfield, it's either going to be a swing pass, a dump off pass to them, or a run. So you have all those guys to converge on him. If they do go deep, Dalton has, historically struggled with deep passes. This year has been really bad. He's we don't have a John Ross or someone who's going to burn you deep. So I think if I were the Bills, I would, if I had to pick one of those two, I'd say short of the coverage, AJ Green, you definitely have to keep him covered. I mean, 3 guys would be ideal. Obviously, you're not going to do that because it's not high school football. So at the very least, I'd say Tre'Davious and then another guy, and then everyone else. I'm stacking the box. I'm not, doing anything like a single deep safety or a coverage. I'm not throwing anyone deep. I'm just keeping everyone up near the line, keeping everything short and in front. You figure Dalton's not going to have time to throw deep, and if he is, it's probably not going to be accurate, which gives your defensive backs, if they get burned on the play, time to get back into position to make a play. So, yeah, I'm just leaving everyone up near the line of scrimmage. I'm not using my blitzes because then they're not available to make the tackle because they're out of position. So I rambled. I don't know if I answered the question exactly, but that's what I would do if I was the Bills coordinator. And I was very surprised to see the Browns do nothing of that sort. They had kind of a strange game plan that didn't make any sense, and 31 points kind of shows it.
Talking about this game, the Bengals are pretty banged up at certain positions, especially tight end. So you look at it, Tyler Eifert, in terms of practice on Wednesday, Tyler Eifert sat out with a back issue. C.J. Uzomah has a knee issue. Ryan Hewitt has a knee issue. He took one low last week where, if you saw, he limped off the field against Cleveland. It appears via Jason Markham at CincyJungle.com says it seems as if Hewitt and Eifert will probably be out this week. We'll see about Uzomah. And then Tyler Kroft, the star that we mentioned earlier, was limited to a neck and knee issue this week. So, that's not good. Andrew Billings has been sitting out. And you know what? Billings has really taken a back seat this year. He started having kind of a prominent role. And, according to Jason Markham, he's playing around 10 snaps a game. Yeesh. So he's kind of banged up this week too. But I mentioned, to your point, Scott, I mentioned some of the stats with the Buffalo Bills and their defense. They are number 3 in the NFL with 6 interceptions on the season. They are tied with the Colts. They are number 11 against the pass. So, they should, and kind of to Jeff Hunter's point as well, they should kind of play to their strength in terms of their pass defense, their defense overall, and really try and make Dalton to force him to try and make mistakes, even though he hasn't been making them lately. But we'll kind of see what their game plan is. Now, there's a lot of keys to this game. For me, Scott, I think one, I'll give you 2 of mine, and then hopefully I don't steal. Hopefully I don't steal any of yours. But I think the Bengals need to lean on their defense in this game because, as good as the Bills' defense has been, their offense has been pretty bad as well. Tyrod Taylor is making plays, but not really, making the gigantic plays. They're more letting their defense take over. And as Jeff Hunter mentioned, their kicker has been pretty outstanding this year. Stephen Hauschka has been hitting a lot of big kicks. The Buffalo Bills have the 29th ranked offense in the NFL. Okay. And they're not very good at passing the ball. I saw a comment from Keith Evans in our Cincy Jungle thread saying LaShawn McCoy has 3.2 yards per carry. So I think if the Bengals continue to ride their defense while hopefully not letting Andy Dalton make mistakes, but if the Bengals defense plays stout, continues to get to the passer, I think they will frustrate the Bills and make enough plays to keep this within reach. The other one, and I kind of feel like this is something almost every week, and it kind of includes the Bengals defense again, is keeping an eye on Charles Clay. Charles Clay is a tight end, kind of a hybrid guy, and he's one of the favorite targets of Tyrod Taylor. And I think if they keep him in check, things will be pretty good, as well as keeping things kind of just in front of them in general, not letting things get behind them, which they've done a very good job of this year. The Bengals, I believe, are number 3 overall in passing yards allowed per game this year, which is very impressive. So those are a couple of my keys. Scott, your keys this week?
I'd say for me, the biggest one, I think on defense is definitely containing LaShawn McCoy. And I know his numbers haven't exactly been that great, but part of that is I think against the Panthers, he did something like 12 carries for 9 yards, which obviously is going to wreck a yards per carry average. And they've played some decent defense. I mean, they have a decent defense. Denver has a very good defense. So he's played against some good teams, but he is getting a lot of receptions. I think he might be one of their top receiving targets for the Bills. So without a doubt, keeping, Vontaze Burfict on him, keeping him in check, because as we kind of talked about early in the show, Tyrod Taylor is not a guy who's going to beat you through his, throwing the ball. He's kind of like playing the Green Bay Packers in that you have a mobile quarterback, but they obviously don't have the Jordy Nelsons and the weapons offensively. So I think we should have no problem covering their receivers, since they are pretty much decimated to a rookie receiver who is struggling to catch the ball. And so for me, it's not so much the passing game. And I know you've kind of mentioned these running quarterbacks in the Bills. You're not a big fan of them. They kind of give you some pause as far as confidence in winning, which makes sense. But I think as long as we contain McCoy and we force Tyrod Taylor to throw, we have a very good chance to shut them down offensively, because he's not a quarterback who can carry you to victory. He's a game manager guy. He's a guy, you give him some decent weapons and he can complete a pass here and there, convert a third down, but he's not going to will the Bills to victory. And that's, you need to force them to make Tyrod Taylor beat you. And if you can do that, and I think we have a very good defense, we can. The problem is, okay, conversely, we have to then do something on offense. And they've had a very good defense. They've been very opportunistic, very good at getting the ball turned over. Number one scoring defense in the NFL. So they obviously know what they're doing on the defensive side of the ball. Our offense, for the first 3 weeks and a little bit last week, has struggled with blocking, which obviously you can't really do a whole lot if you don't have time to throw the ball, time to catch the ball, and time, holes to run the ball. So for me, the biggest thing is we have to contain LaShawn McCoy, and on the other side of the ball, we have to find some way to block them. We have to get, and you mentioned Hewitt being out. We have to figure out what we're going to do as far as how are we going to get these 5 or 6 guys to block the Bills long enough to get passes out. And we can do the short passes, the quick passes, but if they play everyone up to the line of scrimmage, what's it really get you to get a swing pass and have a guy tackled when he catches the ball 2 yards downfield? The other thing I'd love to see is something, whatever, when you're paid to be an offensive coordinator, hopefully this is the kind of thing you're thinking of, and you have something in mind that, the average layman, like I don't have, some way get Joe Mixon involved. And I know they're giving him the ball. He's getting more carries. But getting a carry for -4 yards because, the Browns' whole defense is greeting you when you get the handoff isn't exactly the kind of involvement that I think a lot of us like to see. I want to see him involved in such a way that when he gets the ball, teams aren't saying it's almost like when he gets the ball, the defense knows Mixon's out there. He has the ball. We're just converging on him because they're not doing anything to stop us. Their linemen can't create any holes. We're going to force him to beat us 1-on-11. And he might make 1 or 2 guys miss. He's not going to make 11 guys miss. And that's the thing, is they have to figure out some scheme, something to get Joe Mixon involved. Because the offense, if we can get the running game going and we can stop LaShawn McCoy, I'd say there's no reason we can't. This is the game we should win easily if we do those things. So I guess those are my 2 keys: the running game and the run. I guess that's one key: the running game and the running game.
I gotcha. And you look at the records of these 2 teams: 1-3, the Bengals; 3-1, the Bills. This is still a winnable game, I think, for either team, as I mentioned to Jeff. The Bengals, I saw Royal Flush 513 in our chat room earlier saying no way the Bengals lose 3 in a row at home. I kind of tend to agree with that, but this has been such a Jekyll and Hyde Bengals team over the past year and a half, or maybe even close to 2 years. It's hard to really put your thumb on exactly what they do well. And, it kind of week to week, it's like, oh, the defense plays well. Oh, now the offense plays well. It's just, they're a hard team to really pinpoint exactly what they do well and getting all 3 phases to play well. I'll say the Bengals, everything is telling me the Bills win this game. It's a frustrating opponent. The Bengals have not really been playing that great of football. Yes, they played great last week, and they played better against Green Bay, but there's a lot of things telling me Buffalo, Buffalo, Buffalo. However, there's just something that also is gnawing at me saying, I think they win. I think they go into the bye week as they prepare for the Steelers, which is a big game, and then they've got more winnable games on the stretch. Not to say that the Steelers aren't, because they've looked a little roller coastery, which is a made-up adjective. But you've got the Colts, you've got the Jaguars. Tennessee has been up and down a little bit as well. I mean, there are some winnable games on the slate, this one included. I mean, I think it's tight. I think it's ugly. I'll say 17-13 Bengals, even though my mind is telling me go Bills. What do you think, Scott? You're muted, my friend.
One of these games where you
blast
have
that mute button.
Two very good defenses, two offenses that have their issues. So it's going to come down to things like, turnovers, penalties, the kicking game, those little things. One of those hard-fought games, probably lots of 3-and-outs, just games where both offenses look kind of ugly and they're just struggling, and you just need something. It's kind of hard to predict turnovers, but when you look at things like penalties, those little in-game decisions, those little things that the coach can do to make a difference. The kicking game, whether you have a kicker who can make 63-yard game winners or even keep a kickoff in bounds, I think those little things will make a difference. And unfortunately, I think the Bengals have a better roster. I just don't see them as the team who's going to do those little things. I don't trust their kicker as much as someone like a Steven Hauschka. I don't trust Marvin Lewis over someone like McDermott, who granted only has 4 games under his belt, but I think we've seen enough of Marvin to know that he tends to struggle at those, those coaching kind of things, those things that involve, coaching and making coaching decisions in a game. So unfortunately, I think the Bills probably sneak away with one on some little thing, a converted third down by a penalty, a turnover in the red zone, something little like that. And so I would say maybe 14-13 Buffalo.
Not an unintelligent, again, going double negative, Anthony. You can't do that. Not an unintelligent response, though, Scott, and self-promotion, shameless self-promotion alert. I do a 5 keys to a Bengals victory every week at cincyjungle.com, and I think you and I both discussed 2 of them. Mine was kind of lean on the defense, and then yours right there. I said, I really mentioned do the little things right, because Marvin Lewis has done a decent job in the draft. He's made the team competitive. There's a lot of good feathers in his cap in his 15 years with the Bengals. The one thing that they do not do, they do not do the little things well. Bonehead penalties, missed field goals. You go back to Tyler Eifert's potential touchdown against Houston, which would have won that game just a couple of weeks ago. He inexplicably steps out of bounds, comes back in. It's just stuff where you go, this on well-coached teams, these things just don't really happen as often as they do on the Bengals. Now, I think, he's put together a talented roster, so in that respect, he's coached them well. But I really, really like your point about doing the little things and concentrating on the minute details. Maybe they'll be better at it because this is not a primetime game. Oh, hey, another Marvin Lewis knock. But those are our predictions. Scott, we're going to get out of here in just a second. We've got a couple of quick questions. Again, this is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast with Scott Schultze and Anthony Cosenza. You can get all of our content on YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, and cincyjungle.com. And you can also get in touch with us, the obinsider@gmail.com, as well as at Bengals OBI with questions, comments, all that kind of stuff. And tune in live every episode on our YouTube channel. Subscribe to that. Subscribe to the iTunes link with to get that podcast every week. And if you like our stuff, cool, appreciate it. Scott, we've got a couple, and I'm gonna let you take the lead on this one because you're a lot smarter of a human being than I am. K Rhodes, a regular listener, how do we fix the line to go on a roll for the rest of the season to compete down the stretch and get the run game going? Obviously, that's in reference to the offensive line. We talked about Andre Smith kind of rotating in. To me, for now, the rotation thing kind of works as a Band-Aid. But at some point, it's going to get predictable, especially as you face teams that have good coaches and they see tendencies when you bring in certain guys and guys go out. Or I don't know. I'm not a big – at certain spots on a team, whether it's football or whatever sport, at certain spots on a team, I'm not a big rotation guy. I'm more play the hot hand, play your best players, and go that way. Now, however, there are times where even your better players struggle, and if you need to get a win, you got to get a win. So I understand the dichotomy there, but your thoughts on that and the offensive line and what the Bengals should do, at least at a minimum. Bill Lazor's done a little bit better of a job, I think, than Ken Zampese has, but that's really not saying much because they're still letting up a lot of pressure and sacks.
So the question might as well be, what do you do to create world peace? Pretty much something is solvable. Because there's not really an easy answer for that, because the only thing you can do is play the guys you have. And that seems to be the struggle. I mean, obviously their two best guys, Andrew Whitworth and Kevin Zeitler, they both lost in the offseason. One of the most promising guys they had in training camp was Trey Hopkins, who then promptly got injured. They obviously have had struggles with Ogbuehi and Jake Fisher. That does not seem to be getting a whole lot better. I don't think Ogbuehi has looked as atrocious as last year, but he obviously has not looked great, which is why, as you mentioned, that's why Andre Smith is coming in, and he's getting more playing time. And I think the rotation isn't so much because we're trying to be cute. I think it's just we're trying to find who can play these positions and block somebody. And if the guys you have aren't doing the job, I mean, the only thing you can really do is bring additional guys in, and beyond just constantly rotating in guys like T.J. Johnson, Alex Redmond, Christian Westerman, just trying to figure out who can we put in here who can stand, what big guy can we put in here to stand in front of another big guy to keep him from getting past him for 2 or 3 seconds. And eventually they're going to rotate enough in and out. They're going to find out that these are the 5, if we even have 5, who can do this. You can obviously look at free agency, bringing a guy in. I think if they had a guy on the practice squad who they thought was better, that person would probably already be on the active roster, especially now that Bill Lazor's there and he seems to be more willing to play the best player regardless of name or where they were slotted before the season started. So, short of just pulling Anthony Munoz or something in a time machine and bringing him back, I think the only if you can't change it, the only thing you really can do is put more blockers in. I'm not convinced our tight ends are, exactly elite blockers. I've seen some plays that kind of make me question how good they could be. But if you put in extra blockers, well, then you're just drawing more people up to the line of scrimmage because you have less guys going out on a pass. And that was one of the big complaints folks had with Jermaine Gresham when he first came to Cincinnati was we had struggles. That was the time when we were running guys like Dennis Rowland out at right tackle, and so we were struggling, and so they had to keep Jermaine Gresham in a lot for pass protection, and then everyone complained, hey, he's a first-round pick on a tight end, and he's not getting the ball thrown to him. What's wrong? And because we had no choice. And so I think the only thing you can really do is add extra blockers or constantly rotate people in and out and just kind of hope you find a combination. You could argue it works. You look at people who crack saves. You have 1,000 different combinations of a number. You just keep trying, 0001, 002, 003. You keep trying it till you break that safe. Problem is we don't have every number to work with because we only have so many guys, and if none of them can do the job. So I don't have a good answer because it's like the world peace thing. There's certain things you kind of know generally what you want to do. You want to figure out who your best people are at what positions. You want to look at things like extra blockers. I don't think switching from something, from like a zone blocking scheme to another, so like those aren't really going to make a big difference. Mid-season, you're not really going to make any drastic changes. You're not going to find some miracle free agent who's just sitting out there waiting to be signed. So yeah, it's just a matter of you have to try anything you can think of and pray that something works, or you switch to a the only other thing you could do is totally redo the offense and go to something like a pistol where we're just throwing little quick slants and screens every pass. And that might work for a game. And that's another option you can do the Patriots do, and just reinvent yourself every week offensively, playing to what the defense show a defense one thing 1 week. Hopefully it works for a week. The next team adjusts to it, so you do something different and just constantly change the offense. So I'm just going to throw that out because I can't really think of anything else that would be any better with the pieces we have. Is tell Bill Lazor to earn his money and reinvent this offense every week, trying to come up with something the defense isn't prepared for, and hope it works.
Yeah, and I don't think there is a great answer. I just, I hate to say it that way. I don't, based on what we've seen from certain players, and what they've had to do with who they have now. They could at some point just say, you know what, Trey Hopkins, TJ Johnson, whoever, you're not getting it done. Alex Redmond, you're not getting it done at right guard. Jake Fisher, you're not getting it done at right guard. If the Bengals truly are in win now mode, which I think they are, I think Andre Smith has to be out there pretty significantly because he really is their most talented offensive lineman, and that's not really saying much at this point. So, I don't know. And then K. Rhodes followed up his question with free agents. I think that might be explored during the bye week when, the Bengals maybe get some extra time to acclimate a new player. Should they choose to do that. And then at that point too, guys will be more affordable. It's a less guaranteed contract, all that kind of stuff, which we know the Bengals and Mike Brown just love. So, keep an eye on it. I thought last week against the Browns was very interesting how Bill Lazor tried to do some things, and Paul Alexander. Unfortunately, the Bengals just kind of let some things go with that unit this offseason, and we've seen it. Scott, I know we got to get out of here. There's some good questions here. Kevin Evans in our Cincy Jungle chat says Bengals 34, Bills 13. Don't know about that, but if Keith and Kevin Evans are from the Bahamas, so keep your prayers and thoughts with them after all of the storms and all that stuff going on. Really, there's a question here. Which Bengals tight end which Bengals defender is athletic enough to cover Charles Clay? I would say, based on what we've seen so far, it would be Burfict or probably Nick Vigil. Nick Vigil's shown a lot, so that's kind of a short answer for Kevin Evans's question there. I think Nick Vigil probably, if you're talking about linebacker, has the best chance to do it. Otherwise, they would probably put Sean Williams or George Aloka on him. And then one more, even though it's addressed to me, Scott, I want to hear you as well, your thoughts as well. It's from Cross Out again, the guy who singled you out earlier. Anthony, who would you say needs to have a bigger day for Cincinnati to get the W? AJ Green or whoever is playing tight end? AJ Green. And to me, I don't think that's a question. AJ Green, if you saw last year's game against the Bills, that was a must-win game for the Bengals to keep any kind of hope alive for their playoff hopes. And he went down on the very first series and things weren't the same. Darby's gone. Stephon Gilmore's gone. You heard Jeff Hunter earlier say that Sharice Wright may have to step in at corner as who's their number 3 corner and may have to step in and start this week. So I think AJ Green is always the guy that if you get him going, You get the big plays to him, especially at home. I think it's the big plays. And then you look at, I mentioned earlier the issue at tight end and all the injuries I mentioned. Hewitt, Eifert, Uzama, and Croft all are experiencing some things, and I think that is a big issue. Scott, your thoughts on this before we bail out?
Just quick, I'm going to totally agree and say AJ Green because tight end is nice, but the things that AJ Green can do, on so many pass plays, the catches he makes, especially the year up until last week, Andy Dalton has had with the errant throws, the underthrows, and the deep balls. The way he adjusts, the things that he can do are sustain a drive and get you into the red zone. It can help you score. I don't think any tight end on this team is going to do those kind of things. He's not. Croft and Uzoma aren't guys you're going to throw 12 times a game who are going to have that catch radius and make those catches and who are going to win contested balls and double cut. The things AJ Green just, without a doubt, he is, ever since he's been here, he has been the passing game. The passing game lives and dies as long as AJ Green is on the field. And so without a doubt, I have to go AJ Green. There's just no question.
Yep, and you have to know also Dalton and Green have far longer of a rapport in terms of the offense, how they're used to what each other does, than really any other player at the skill positions. Yes, there are other ancillary weapons that can help out, but I think anytime Andy Dalton can get AJ Green going, especially on their home turf, I think it's a big deal. Scott and I disagreed on the predictions this week. That's okay. That's okay. My mind is telling me to agree with Scott, but my heart's telling me otherwise. Again, you can get this show on YouTube, on SoundCloud, on iTunes, and at cincyjungle.com. We're available via email, theobinsider@gmail.com, as well as on Twitter at BengalsOBI. Scott, thanks for coming on tonight, brother. And I know you sound much clearer tonight, buddy. You've got a new piece of equipment. I love it.
Yeah, and I do have a second. I have new headphones, but apparently you have to charge them before you use them. So when you find that out,
pesky technology.
Yeah, I can. And the frustrating thing is after building a brand new workbench in the garage and doing all that stuff, I can do that, but plugging in something in a computer apparently is a little
By the way,
hard.
I mean, Scott and I are now BFFs because we text each other now. But you should put up that picture on Twitter, man. That's pretty impressive what you build. I'm not a handy guy, so I am envious of your skill in terms of building that. If you built that by yourself and by hand, man, that's good stuff. It's
basically just cutting and screwdriver and a saw. It wasn't too complicated, but it's not.
I'm not good
done.
at that stuff,
I still have to embellish it. It's just right now a empty workbench. You still have to add some more things to it before it's like fully functional, but structurally it's there.
I think you should brag, but that's just me. Thanks for coming on tonight, brother. Always good talking to you. It was great talk. Yep, and we're talking about a win, like I said at the beginning of the show, so that's always a good thing. Our thanks to Jeff Hunter over at Buffalo Rumblings, the SB Nation Buffalo Bills site. Go check out some of his stuff and what they're doing over at that site, especially this week as the Bengals take on the Bills. Let's hope for a Bengals win, especially as they head into the bye week. Thank you to our live viewers who tuned in, gave a lot of different feedback, a lot of different questions. Appreciate that. Tune in and do that at cincyjungle.com and YouTube every episode. Scott, did you have something else?
Yeah, I just wanted to add,
buddy.
As far as our guest Jeff Hunter, if folks want to go to the Bills website, the Buffalo Rumblings site, they can read his comments. We asked him some questions, or he asked us some questions that we answered, and conversely, we asked him some questions that he answered. So make sure to check out the Cincy Jungle site to see his answers to our questions, and then go to the Buffalo Rumblings. And every time you said Buffalo Rumblings, I thought you said he was working at Buffalo Wild Wings, which is a restaurant, a wing restaurant.
He's not. He is not. And if he's going to Buffalo Wild Wings at 4:30 in the morning for his job, He may want to rethink life. Not that working at Buffalo Wild Wings is a bad thing for anybody who might. Just if you're showing up at Buffalo Wild Wings at 4:30 in the morning, that's pretty rough. But anyway, thanks for tuning in, guys. We're gonna get out of here. Let's hope for a Bengals win this week. Thanks for tuning in. This has been the Orange and Black Insider with Anthony Cosenza and Scott Schultze. See you next time.